Hello, everyone. Welcome to the New Mexico Compost Coalition meeting. It's February 2025, and it's really nice to see you all here. My name is Isabel Jeniches. I'm with the New Mexico Healthy Soil Working Group, and we facilitate this monthly meeting of all things compost and people who are interested and passionate about it. So today we're really happy to have with us Eva Stricker, and she will talk to us about compost applications on rangeland, which is a really fascinating multi-year collaborative project and research project that's been going on for a few years now here in New Mexico. And I'm really excited to get an update on that. So thank you, Eva, for joining us today. So we'll start as always with a little round of intros, seeing who's in the room. And so yeah, if you could just introduce yourself and maybe tell Eva if you have heard of compost on rangeland at all, or if this is something completely new and unknown to you. I think that could be good for her to know. And I'm going to just mute you until you are speaking. Okay, great. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll go around the room and starting with Josh.
Hello, I'm Josh Waybright. I'm a soil food web student and practitioner, so I do lots of microscopy work looking at microbes in soil and compost. And I work with Casey and Amber. We've actually started a growing soil health coalition and launching a website and some social media stuff to help kind of promote the works that we do, and hopefully we'll be doing some projects and collaborations with y'all coming soon.
Wow, that's exciting, Josh. Great news. And are you familiar with compost on rangeland at all, or is that new to you?
Yes, I'm very familiar with the work that Quivira does.
Excellent. Okay, Casey.
Hi, Casey Williams. I'm a compost and soil microbiology enthusiast. Do some farming locally, and I work for the Soil Food Web School online. And as Josh mentioned, several of us started a coalition just recently. Yeah, mainly for outreach, marketing, helping each other with labor projects, learning together, stuff like that. And I have heard about compost on rangeland before.
Just a little bit. That's great. Thank you. Amanda, welcome. Would you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Amanda Losh. I am the chair of the Sustainable Ecosystems Working Group for the Wyoming Food Coalition. So I'm located in Laramie, Wyoming, and I'm a relatively new chair of the group, a little under a year. But the group has been really focused on soil health over the past few years, and in particularly on composting, but mostly composting from the standpoint of like smaller intensive production operations. And I have more of an interest in rangelands or these larger scale livestock production in particular. And so that's why this particular presentation was really interesting to me, to bring back some information to my group about the application of compost to rangelands.
Excellent. Thanks for joining, Amanda. And Marta.
Me? I'm here with Lisa Haynes. She's the one who got me into this. I'm an ethnobotanist in Tucson and a volunteer at Mission Garden, which is a really neat historical agricultural museum, a living museum. But I also have my own rangeland in far western Colorado, and I'm trying to work to improve the range. I'd never heard of composting rangeland before till Lisa got me into this. So Lisa.
Yeah, I might as well. Wouldn't you know, my Zoom decided it needed to update the software. So it's probably going to be finished in a few minutes, so I'll go back to my own computer. But anyway, yeah, Lisa Haynes, and I own about 22 plus acres in Hillsboro, New Mexico, and including part of the gallery riparian stream that we have called Percha Creek. And I've done several workshops with Quivira at Red Canyon, and I've talked to Eva before about grant writing and all that stuff. So she and I need to catch up. And I've also done watershed restoration workshops here in Arizona. And I lived in Brad Lancaster's neighborhood, who's kind of like the guru. And then I've also worked a lot of cattle, and backcountry work, and I would like to start regeneratively grazing my land. So that's my story.
Welcome, both of you, and how nice that we have neighbors in the room. Okay, Christy, please go ahead, introduce yourself. You are muted.
There we go.
That's
My name's
good.
Christy Everett. We have a small ranch near Corona, New Mexico. And right now they're building a huge wind farm here. And part of it's on our land. And I know there is such a thing as composting on rangelands. And I'd like to look into the possibility of using it during the rehabilitation phase of the wind farm construction. So that's what I'm mostly interested in.
Very interesting. Amy, please go ahead.
Hey everybody, I'm Amy. I'm with the Quivira Coalition and working on a project where we are also working with compost on rangelands. In fact, it's a project that Eva kind of helped us get, and ran our program for the first part of it. So I'm just really super interested to hear what else we can learn from the research. Excited to be here. Great.
Thank you, Amy. And next up on my screen is Jennifer Paris. Please go ahead.
Hi. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm Jennifer Paris, and I've been interested in compost for a while and working with the Taos County, and also a little bit with NMED. I just finished their course that they give once a year on compost facility management. So that was really cool. And went to the Regenerate conference, and so that's good. But I now have a full-time job with NRCS in Taos. So I'm supporting farmers and ranchers with that kind of work. Everybody's out of the office today, so I'm like, oh, I get to go. They're all in the field helping farmers and ranchers. Thank you.
Great. Well, congratulations on your new job, Jennifer.
Thank you.
We won't tell on you.
Yeah. And I know Eva. Hi, Eva.
Dawn, please go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dawn from Soilutions. And I ran into Eva at the airport getting on a plane last week coming back from the compost conference. It was like Cinderella and the shoe, because she's, we want to talk to you about compost on rangelands. And then we all had to board and didn't get to see her again. So I was so excited to see that she's going to talk about it today, and happy to see you all here.
Great. Thanks for joining, Dawn. Sandra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sandra West, the Sustainable Waste Specialist at the City of Albuquerque in the Sustainability Office. So I generally do more urban scale composting and food waste, but I am definitely excited to hear more about composting on rangeland, as we are surrounded by a lot of more rural spaces, and our systems in our urban space are very much impacted by things that happen on the rangeland. So thank you so much. And it's great to see you, Eva, and so many familiar faces.
Absolutely. We're all connected, right? Rebecca, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Baldwin-Cordick. I also work with Quivira. I work on the same project as Amy. It's also has a lot to do with compost, and was, thought up in large part by Eva. So yeah, we work with producers on rangelands, and if you guys are interested in that project, I can put this link here to the project itself, and if you have any questions about it, here's my email. Actually, can I do that? Maybe I can't do that. It won't let me. AI won't let me. But at any rate, and I'm also a soil health specialist, and I have my own private coaching and consulting company to help producers work on some of the challenges that they might be having on their farms or ranches, productivity wise, and I address that through soil health principles. So really great to see so many talented people in the room, and I'm excited to hear what Eva has to say.
Hey, right. Yeah, and you should be able to put things in the chat. It's not restricted. So, and otherwise, maybe during the discussion, you can do a plug for the project. That would be great. Seems
There
very
it is. I was trying to send it to AI and it wasn't working.
Okay, great. Kendall, please go ahead.
Hey, I am actually in Montana, so I'm a ways away, but I'm a land health specialist with a small rancher collaborative, and I have quite a few ranchers who are trying different things with compost, whether it's like a compost tea, a compost slurry, just spreading compost on troubled parts of rangeland. And I don't have a ton of results yet, but it's something we're monitoring and setting up some trials. And so, yeah, I just wanted to learn more about what you guys are seeing.
Cool. Thanks, Kendall. And for those who are not already on the Compost Coalition mailing list, feel free to put your email in the chat and I will add you if you want to continue joining. No pressure. I have Lisa next. Lisa.
Actually, I was sitting with Martha.
Well, there you go.
And I finally got Zoom to queue up on my computer. So
okay.
I've already introduced myself. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. And Zia.
Hello, my name is Zia. I work with Project Feed the Hood and SWAP. I'm here we are a resource, so being able to point people in the right direction in whatever farming capacity they're in is always beneficial. So excited to learn about a new composting method. Thank you.
Thanks. And Navona.
Hey everyone, I'm Navona Gallegos. I'm with the Healthy Soil Working Group. Really super looking forward to this presentation. I know a little bit about composting on rangeland, but I don't have any hands-on experience, so I'm really excited to hear the details.
Lots of curiosity in the room, Eva. And Justin, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, Justin here with Soilutions, joined by my wife Dawn. So she kind of said it all, just a commercial compost manufacturing site in Albuquerque, South Valley, operate on 15 acres. And so pleased to be part of this group, and what a great number of attendees today. So thank you, Eva, for your presentation today. Very much look forward to it. You know, we are very familiar with compost applications, being in the compost business. But certainly, you know, curious about if you're using it or recommending it as an inoculant, as more of a in-depth ground soil conditioner, you know, what the recommended levels of application are to really make differences across people's properties. Private, you know, homeowners all the way up to large-scale rangeland owners. So thank you all.
Thanks, Justin. Carol Ann.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Ann, and I'm the director of the Upper Gila Watershed Alliance based in Silver City. And we have a project called the New Earth Project, where we take food waste from school cafeterias and we put it through a garbage disposal, mix it with shredded wood and a little bit of biochar, and we put it into Johnson-Su bioreactors, or modified Johnson-Su bioreactors. So we have almost 120 bioreactors, and so we are really eager to learn about rangeland application because it's something that we've been interested in learning about for a while now. So thank you for the presentation, Eva.
Great. Thanks, Carol Ann. Art, can you hear us? Yes.
Everybody, can you hear me?
Yeah. We
I
can't
am
see you.
saving bandwidth, so I'm going to turn on my camera kind of quickly, see my face. I am currently working on my house, so I'm in my work clothes and I'm jumping into this conversation and learning. I'm in Delia, which is a really small remote town in New Mexico. I purchased property here with a little piece of land, getting on a little adventure in regenerative farming as well as environmental stewardship. And I am trying to learn as much as I can. The soil here, it's in the scrublands of New Mexico in between Vegas and Santa Rosa. And it's I hear it's very challenging, the soil here. So my first step and probably the first year is to create tons of composting. And I am kind of familiar with it. Actually, can you see this book? Oh, there, that book.
Okay.
It's a Quivira book about rural dryland composting. So I'm learning as much as I can, and so I can create tons of compost and slowly distributing it throughout the land that I own. So I'm here to learn.
Excellent. Yeah, and that is a great resource, and maybe one of the Quivira folks can put the link in the chat, because that's a good resource to know about. Rob, please introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Rob Hirsch, the Executive Director of the Climate Change Leadership Institute and the co-founder of the Healthy Soil Working Group. I'm really blown away and impressed by the group we have here today, and so thankful to be on this Zoom with you all. I really love to see us ramp up composting in New Mexico to a level that no one's ever seen before. But in all seriousness, it's such an important opportunity we have and such great work being done that we can expand upon. I'm really a big fan of Eva's, and I know that we have so much rangeland in New Mexico that what an opportunity this is. And thank you so much for this presentation that you're leading.
Great. And last but not least, I have Annie's iPhone. Who is Annie?
Hi. My name is Annie Montes. My pronouns are she, her, ella. And I'm the Urban Waters Ambassador for the Middle Rio Grande watershed. So I'm just here today thinking at the landscape scale how compost can help improve ecosystem health.
But she was also my office mate when we were grad students, and that's so fun. Hi, Annie.
Hi.
Very nice. Well, welcome everyone. So let's jump in because Eva has a lot of interesting things to tell us. Go ahead, Eva.
I sure do. Okay, let's see. Thanks, everybody. I'm so overstimulated with all of the exciting people here and the people I don't know. I'm sure I am just as excited. There's like, I often think about composting. There's the production side. Oh my gosh, so much we don't know. And then there's the use side. Oh my gosh, so much we don't know. For this presentation, we're going to chip away at this side of it. So just using it. There's lots of things we could talk about for optimizing making it. But for the next half hour, how are we going to use it? I'm going to totally admit, I repurposed this from a different conference, from the Compost conference that was last week. And they had this beautiful slide background. And so I just shamelessly kept the slide background. This is not my own photo. But so always giving credit to our funders while we have them. This work was supported by the USDA. All right. This is going to be a very quick aside. I am going to present work that's all been published in peer-reviewed journals. There is a mountain of data that I have not yet published, but I'm not going to talk about it because we're recording. And I consider, until it has gone through this whole process, I consider it preliminary. So I'm happy to talk about it with humans, but I don't usually record that. This way, the recording, if I say something weird, you know, really? You could go to the actual publication and double check. So it's my way of making sure I'm giving really good information. And so because we're not all born knowing what peer review means, I'm going to do a really, really quick overview. And I really want to emphasize that there is so much valuable information that is not peer reviewed. There is traditional ecological knowledge. There is storytelling. There is people living on the landscape every single day, seeing and trying things. That is super valuable. And I just want to say that is such valuable information. I just also want to share what is the process that I go through to get this information to you all. So here's a quick rundown. So first, I do the scientific method, which is what we all sort of learned about in school, we hope, depending on the quality of our education in our system. I read about something I'm interested in. I generate a hypothesis. I design and do an experiment, which in the case of ecology, usually takes at least a year just to do the experiment, because we sort of wait for it to go through all 4 seasons, set it up, you measure it after about a year. You collect the data and you error check the data, because there's always errors in the data. So you spend a lot of time making sure you have quality data. Then you analyze it. So you have to like learn to be a statistician, depending on the field you're in. And then hooray, you get to write up the results. Great. You would think that that was enough work already, but no, you have only just begun. Next, you figure out what journal you're going to go for, and then you have to format the paper to meet the journal requirements. Some people require 1/4 inch margins and size 11 font, etc. But you also want to frame to the audience. So if the journal is focused on range managers, you're going to give background information and context that's relevant to that audience. If your audience is people who study microbes, you're going to give a different framing and context. So you have to do quite a bit of work after you've done the whole study to sort of tailor it to the journal. Here's a step that you would think should not be as hard as it is. You have to get your co-authors to read and agree to the paper that you want to publish. This is the herding cats step, and can take a while. But hopefully they read and agree that that should be submitted. Next, you just mark off, you know, a half a day to try to get things uploaded into the portal online, get all the files uploaded, make sure that they format correctly. Often you have to suggest reviewers to the journal. So you have to sort of get the contact information of the people who may or may not read your paper eventually. Okay, so then you hit send, yay! And sometimes 1 to 2 days later, they immediately reject you. And that means that it went to the editor. The editor goes, this is not the right scope for our journal. Man, that's a bad day. Anyway, you go back to step 2, you find a new journal and you put it back through. Okay, but hopefully you make it through desk reject. Then you wait for reviews, which can be, anyway, it can be a long time. Usually the journal will submit to 2 reviewers at least. And then the editor, the handling editor, will also read it. So you're getting 3 expert opinions on your work. And sometimes their expert opinion is that it should not be published in that form, and you get rejected. And then you go back to step 2. So, and then you find another journal and keep going. Otherwise, the reviewer step is incredible. You get so much valuable information. My papers are always better when 2 people have picked them apart and thought really deeply about them. And so this step of revising the manuscript to address reviewer concerns is a substantial part of what I do. Often my response to reviewers is as long or longer than the manuscript. And then this is the step where I did say that there are usually 2 reviewers. Every once in a while, you'll get reviewer 1 gives this recommendation and reviewer 2 gives the exact opposite recommendation. and then you have to figure out how to dance between those two. Anyway, so then you go back to step 4, and they will send it back to review. So you are being, anytime you make updates, they send it back to reviewers and see if that's has met the criteria of those experts. Yay! Finally, after often years, your paper is accepted. Here's something that many people are surprised at who haven't thought about this. The author pays the journal to have this published. It's usually between $1,000 and $2,500. What that means is when I write a grant, I hope that I get a paper published, and I earmark funding in the grant to eventually pay for the paper fees to the journal. It's more if you do open access. So whenever people do have open access papers out on the internet, you should really thank them, because they have invested a lot in you being able to read their paper freely. Then you meticulously check over the proofs, you submit your files, and you try to, and now it's really common that they're like, we want social media language. We want like a snapshot PDF that you can showcase on the front. So there's like a lot of steps, is my point. And then here's the secret step 9. To be sort of a thoughtful professional, for every paper that I send, 2 people have to review it, which means I approximately will review 2 papers for every one I send out, because that's a way of balancing the cosmos. The other thing to know, reviewers are not paid. So, the hours that I spend reviewing 2 papers, you don't get paid. It's just a expectation professionally. And reviews are almost always anonymous. And I can go in a deep dive there. Anyway, that was a pretty lofty aside, but the 4 papers in the rest of this presentation, all of them have gone through process, which is very different than like, oh, I just got the data yesterday and I'm showing it to you fresh. So, all right, into the content, into the why are we here. I think many of us know that drylands are important, but there's a lot of reasons that drylands are important. More than 2 billion people have their livelihoods in drylands. And then related to carbon, so obviously the tropical rainforests and the boreal forests suck up more carbon per year than we do in drylands. But because we're so drought and flooding and all of that is really tied to how much carbon we take up, the variability year to year is driven by drylands. So drylands have a major impact on the carbon cycle at a global scale, even if we're not sucking up the most. And then, of course, we dig into working lands. It sounds like most people on this call are very familiar with why working lands are important. We often think about things like livestock production, right? Many people, we're talking about rangelands, but of course, there are so many places that humans connect with these lands, right? There's cultural, spiritual appreciation and needs that we have, as well as, when I sort of have my ecology brain on, I am thinking about things like nutrient cycling, water cycling, carbon cycling, and all of those things are happening in drylands and grasslands. And we know that there's been major periods of degradation. So the Dust Bowl, almost 100 years ago, was this interaction between some extreme climate situations as well as human management. And it led to us just moving all the topsoil off a vast part of our continent. And so we're still recovering from that. And that is all I'm going to say. We're still recovering from that, even though it was 100 years ago, because things happen fairly slowly when we don't have rain consistently. All right, so how do we, so there's things that are bad, drylands are important, bad things have happened to them. What do we do about it? So the question that I've been asking for the last 5 years is how do we make waste productive and build soil health? And of course, this audience will know that compost is hopefully a part of that. So what do we already know about compost addition onto rangeland? This graph is kind of a nightmare. We're going to walk through it. So we compiled data from 27 publications across 5 continents. And so we read through all the paper, we pulled the data into a spreadsheet of our own. Those papers measured a lot of things related to carbon, including above ground biomass, below ground biomass, and soil carbon. And the shapes in this figure are just representing which pool of carbon that they were measuring. And then from these articles, people measured those responses from different time since the compost was added, from 1 month up to 12 years, which is the color. All right, so then because we have across 5 continents, these sites ranged across a lot of annual temperatures. We had cooler, wetter sites and hotter, drier sites. So we've gotten one axis and the colors. Now the effect size. So if it's above 0, in their experiment, whatever the response was higher where compost was added than where it wasn't. So above 0 means it was higher where the compost was added. If it's below 0, there was less carbon in the plots that had compost than their controls. So that's all of our axes. And so now let's looking at the actual data. Most of the time of all of these 27 publications, most of the times when people put compost down and they went back later and measured some form of carbon, there was more carbon where they added the compost. So I haven't talked about, this is science, this is not rocket science. This is what we would expect. We added a carbon source and we can find more carbon at the end. But I think especially when we get out to 12 years after a single compost addition, I think it really points to, we've actually changed the structure of the system. The system is behaving differently than it was before because we're seeing this prolonged effect after a single instance of compost addition. So when I talked about doing the scientific method, this is what we started with. We wanted to gather what has been done before on dry rangelands and compile it and see, is it worth pursuing in New Mexico, or, is it flip a coin? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. To me, the data that stood as of 2023 was that this was really promising, especially in a carbon lens. Oops. There we go. So, feeling like I wasn't going to completely ruin people's ranches by adding compost, we started to ask 3 pretty fundamental stakeholder-driven questions. Like, I'm guessing that the couple of ranchers on here, these 3 questions seem like they will probably be pretty important. How much do I put on? Does what kind I add matter? And where do I put it? Right? Those are some pretty fundamental questions to efficiently use our resources to get a beneficial outcome. So I'm going to go through these 3 in the next 12 minutes or so. And is there anything else I want to say? No. So the other way that I can think about how much do we add, you can twist that question around and ask, does the effect of compost saturate? And if it did, that would be awesome, because that would mean if we add a little bit, we get a benefit, but at some point it would level off and we wouldn't get a benefit anymore. Well, then there's no point in paying for more, right? We're not adding any benefit. Because, as everyone on here will know, compost is expensive. Getting it out on the landscape is expensive over these large scales. Often ranchers don't have things like manure spreaders, or so spreading out the solid form of compost is tedious at best, says all of the people who have helped me shovel compost off of the back of a truck. Yes, I can already anticipate people are going to ask me about compost teas. That would be a very appealing way of getting things out, because there's much more often water trucks out in rural places than there are manure spreaders. I haven't yet researched anything about compost teas, so would love to talk about it, but it will be in a hypothesis context, not a results context. Okay, so it's very expensive. Even if you add just a little bit, it's like $3,000 an acre. Yikes. So we did this study at Polk's Folly and Soul Ranch up near Wagon Mound. This paper was published today, so this is available on the internet today. I'm very excited. That was an accident. And we looked at different amounts of compost. None is our control, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and 1 inch. And I'm gonna hold questions. I'll catch them at the end. Come on, if something's unclear, just come off, and if otherwise, I'll catch them at the end. Great. So we added this in 2020, masked and all. Oh, there's that dog just passed away. Oh, Otter. Picture. All right. So, oops, sorry. We added different amounts, and we went back over the next 2 years and measured what happens. So the first thing we looked at, people care about water, is infiltration rate, which is a measure of getting at hydraulic conductivity. But I think many of you have done this test with me where you sink a ring in the ground, pour water in, and see how long it takes to go in. Thrilling. It is truly a thrilling thing to measure. But at one of our sites, we saw a major increase in how fast the water went in the first year. That effect diminished in the second year to where it was not statistically significant. But if you're a rancher and you have even a transient time where water goes into your soil faster, you're probably pretty happy. With the caveat that this was one site in 1 year that we saw this effect, but water is important. The sort of most exciting for people who care about the potential for carbon markets, which is quite a caveat, is this result. We saw a linear increase in soil carbon in the top 10 centimeters with compost death after 2 years. So when we collect these, we try to brush off the compost from the surface, and we try to core down so that we're getting that mineral soil layer. And after 2 years, the more compost we added, the more organic carbon we found. To the extent that this is twice as much. We have doubled the amount of carbon in the soil after 2 years when we add 1 inch of compost. But it's a linear effect. So if you wanted to add a little bit more carbon, a little bit of carbon to your soil, you can add a little bit of compost. And so from these two results, you can see that it's a linear effect. We have not yet detected any sort of saturating effect from these two results. But we know from results from Ariel Leger in Arizona that if you add 3 inches of compost, it's quite destructive to the soil. It smothers the soil, plants can't germinate and things like that. So I'm hypothesizing that there is going to be an inflection point. It's somewhere between 1 inch and 3 inches in terms of like getting the biggest bang for your buck, but it's going to be really expensive. I can't imagine that most people are going to be trying to put 2 inches of compost on rangelands. And I'll get back to where in just a second. All right, so when we think about how much, we doubled soil organic carbon, and we had faster water infiltration rate when we added more compost. All right, but what kind of compost do we use? For this study, we tested biosolid-based and manure-based compost. I haven't continued to test biosolid compost. It's really nitrogen rich, which is it's very different than the context of drylands. But in 2020, there was some limitations of what I could purchase and do, and so this is what I could do. So So the sort of fancy science way of talking about this question is when we use different feedstocks, we get a different resulting microbial community in the compost that comes out the other end of the composting process. So we can ask, how do these novel microbial communities impact our soil health, right? We have these different communities. What do they do? So we looked at biosolid-based compost, manure-based compost, and controls. This we added in 2021. We looked at it 1 year after addition. And again, we're sampling in the top 10 centimeters, which is about 4 inches. All right, so this stacked bar charts on a Tuesday afternoon is pretty fun. The way to read these are the relative abundance of different microbial taxa. In this case, this is bacteria. And so, if you think of a petri dish and you leave it out open to the air, or you scrub your toilet and plate it out on a plate, you'll have lots of different kinds of things on your petri plate. This is analogous to these are the different kinds of things that we saw in the soil. So what we can see, this is the baseline condition of the soils. So no compost had been added yet, and they're pretty similar to each other. So the relative abundances of all of these different color taxa are more or less the same, not huge differences across these 9 plots. In contrast, the compost itself is quite different in its relative abundance. So you can look at biosolid compost has a lot of rare taxa that we couldn't group to a higher resolution group. And then we can see manure compost had way more firmicutes in the Bacilliales group. And so the thing to know is that they are very different from the soil in their relative abundances. That was before we put the compost onto the soil. Now we get to hypothesize. What do you all think? So after 1 year, we added these composts. We added the biosolid compost to the biosolid plots. We added the manure compost to the manure plots, and the control didn't get any compost. Do you think that these relative abundances look more like compost or look more like the soils we started with? Does anyone want to venture a guess? I'll even open the chat. See if anyone wants to guess.
Soil food webbers, you are being challenged.
Right.
I'm betting it didn't change the soil all that much.
Okay, we've got one hypothesis, grapes. All right, I'll let you all think quietly, but I do like to make people think about what they think will happen. I will say, I thought that the soil would change. I thought I was hitting this system with a big hammer. I was adding all these novel microbes, and that some of them would love where I put them and they would persist. I was wrong. So Josh wins the hypothesis competition. There are some, especially our eyes are drawn to some patterns, but statistically, there are no differences in the composition of these different communities, these microbial communities. I will say we've done some measurements of abundance of biomass, of microbial biomass. That does seem to increase when we add compost, but it's sort of making the entire pie bigger. It's not changing the relative abundance within the pie. It seems like everything just expands. That said, the last thing I want to say is even this rare taxa lump, there are some within that group that really did persist or expand. And so what's gratifying to me is if we find some really novel functions, we don't have to look through the entire set of bacteria that are out there. We can just go like, oh, if we see some novel function, it's probably this rare one that wasn't there and is now there. So it sort of reduces the world of possibility when we need to go look for it further. this is something ranchers care about. This is, my nerd brain is so happy looking at these bar plots, but let's get back to what ranchers care about. Ranchers care about above ground biomass because that's what's feeding their livestock. And so biosolid-based compost approximately doubles the amount of biomass that's out there. I will say it's substantially driven by annual forbs. So you can kind of see in this outline, there's more darker green and forby looking things in this picture. The ranchers that I've worked with, while they would prefer perennial grasses to be supported, over the short term, having more solar panels, having more leaves out that's collecting carbon, they tend to think that's a good thing. I also want to make clear that I was doing a lot of these experiments in places that are managed, right? If we saw a really nasty invasive weed come in, I would just, this didn't happen, but this was my plan. I would just ask the rancher to put up electric fencing and just hammer these experimental plots and graze that down before they went to seed, right? So I just want to assure people that I was mindful of not creating a bigger problem than what I was trying to solve. But yes, so generally annual forbs respond quickly when we give them nitrogen and other fertilizers. Great. This one was surprising to me. So this is surface stability, aggregate stability, and this is just sort of a visual of what that means. This is a more stable aggregate than this one that sort of falls apart in the water. Manure-based compost decreased aggregate stability in the first 6 months or so. That was a transient effect. It actually sort of recovered. I think that this is related to biocrusts, that the biocrusts were a little bit affected by being buried over the short term. And so they were not holding the soil together in the same way. I have some data that I'm trying to chase that down. That's my current hypothesis as to why we saw this transient decrease in the surface soil stability, because that's not what I was expecting. I was expecting adding organic material would help bind soil together. But this is why we do science, because you find really surprising things sometimes. Have to chase it down. All right, how am I doing on time? I'm doing okay. All right, so what kind? Soil microbial communities resist compost microbes, and we doubled productivity with one of our composts. All right, so last but not least, where do we put it? It's really expensive. Let's get the biggest bang for our buck. Let's think critically about where this might benefit the wider landscape. So we don't have to put it anywhere. We can put it in targeted places. So we, because I was working with Quivira, and there's the whole legacy of the Bill Zedike work and everything. Lots of people are doing these erosion control structures to heal things like head cuts, right? And transform the hydrology of these systems a little bit, which has a sort of disproportionate impact downstream if you can heal this head cut. So this one was our sort of biggest study. We worked on 5 ranches across all of New Mexico. Each ranch, we treated 18 head cuts with these rock rundown structures. And then above each head cut, we put our treatment. So this is looking upslope. This is the head cut itself. Upslope is the area that we put our compost. In this case, we tried compost or mulch. We also tried seeding and no seeding, trying to add sort of restore the vegetation community. And like I said, this is a lot of work. Let me emphasize, this was like 5 ranches. We drove all over the place. And we found no effect of compost on anything that we measured. So no effect on infiltration rate, no effect on aggregate stability, no effect on soil carbon. That one was really strange to me. And the conclusion that I draw is that in a lot of ways, these rock structures are so effective on their own. So you can see, this is after a year, how much sediment has accumulated in between these rocks in this rock structure. So my recommendation is, if you have an erosion problem, there is no need to add compost or mulch. This physical intervention is highly effective, and put your compost somewhere else. The other thing is that sort of popped out of this study, and this is why I love working with ranchers, because they're there every single day, whereas me, the researcher, shows up from the big city of Albuquerque, once or twice a year. So love working with ranchers, just invaluable information and insight that I get. For example, multiple people independently told me that snow persists on the compost sites. I am not a hydrologist, so I desperately need someone to help me design how to understand that better. My hypothesis is that it's holding so much more moisture that it's insulating the snow from melting too quickly. But yeah, this is part of science, right? Like the first two studies I showed were like, yeah, kind of did what we were expecting. This one, it's like we did a whole bunch of work, and sometimes we don't see a strong effect. There's a lot of reasons, I think. It was a drought year. 2021 into 2022 was quite droughty. The timing of this, because of the funding, was that we were putting things out very late in the season. So the compost was going out after senescence. And so maybe that had an effect. We didn't sort of get this burst of response when we were putting it out sort of before or during the growing season. So lots to untangle here. But I think it's really important to share both, like, yes, things happened as expected, and also sometimes nothing happens. But also nothing bad happened, which is great. So I would say overall, if you take something away of what Eva told you, based on my research, is that compost amendments are promising. They're not going to solve everything. But we have some information now where people could reason out for themselves how much they want to spend and where they might put it and what kind of compost they might consider using. And with that, so many collaborators at UNM, so many collaborators at Quivira Coalition, and then here's the plug for the Soil to Supper program, which it will have. I'm super excited about this eventual data set because we're going to work with 50 ranchers over the next 4.5 years now. 4 years. 50 ranchers over the next 4 years to get compost or biochar out. And then we're going to measure before and after the amount of carbon. So we'll have a much bigger data set than anything I've been playing with so far. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
That's really great. Fascinating research, Eva. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes left. We can run maybe 5 minutes over if you have time, because there was a lively discussion in the chat. But I will just invite people to unmute and speak up and check in with Eva about things.
Okay, depending on how much rain the rangeland received that year, yeah, I certainly suspect that we're going to see a bigger effect when we have more rainfall. We haven't done this enough to have that variability. I am aiming to go after a grant, if grants exist anymore, to retest things sort of now that it's been 5 years, and we can pull on that thread a little bit more. But yeah, shout out for long-term ecological and long-term agroecological data. If we don't have funding to measure things every year, we can't get at those kinds of questions. And it's so important and useful. So, call your legislators, support long-term ecological and agroecological funding. Yeah. Let's see. 134 cubic yards to achieve 1 inch depth. That sounds right to me. It's like 38 per quarter inch, so times 4. Does that look right, Amy? I feel like all of us have done these calculations a bunch of times. That looks right-ish to me. And compost is indeed top dressed. Yes, top dressed, not told in. Yeah. Go ahead, Cecilia. Hi.
Sorry, this really loud truck just passed by me right when you called my name. Hi, yeah, so I have a question. With where did you source the compost? Does it come directly from the farm itself, or is it outsourced?
Great question. Varied. So the biosolid compost came from New Mexico, or sorry, the Albuquerque municipal waste, so human manure. I have purchased from Soilutions. Their compost is great. Highly recommend. We also, funnily enough, we worked with Polk Folly Farm because they do, they compost their pig waste in process of making bacon and sausage and things like that. I actually really liked their compost because they don't screen it. And so the chunks of wood and things sort of held things down a little bit. I think it helped it to keep from blowing around or having surface flow. So for future reference, especially compost producers, if you're putting it out over large areas, maybe don't screen it, or maybe recommend people buy the like crappy stuff that's got chunks in it, because it seemed to work really well. And then bought from Reunity Resources, and I think that's it. Those are who sourced us. Ideally, we would, and this is part of the Soil to Suffer project, when we can eventually get permission to start composting on people's sites, which is a whole lot of bureaucracy between step A and step B. That's the idea. We want people to be producing on site and then adding it directly. That will close that loop substantially, right? We won't have the transportation cost. We won't have it will be a better closed system if it's staying close. Also, even though the microbes were having a huge impact, I just like the idea of having the microbes that are already there stay there, rather than bringing microbes hundreds and hundreds of miles into new environments. It just sits better with me as a risk-averse person. So yes, absolutely, we need to promote composting on site. And anyway, ask Amy over a beer how fun it is to try to get permission to help people do that. I feel like there's gray hairs because of this. Go ahead,
I have a question. Yeah. And comments too. I'm so glad you mentioned the unscreened thing, because I was going to mention that we're working with the NMDOT right now to see, they're kind of getting wary of biosolid compost due to PFAS, et cetera. And they specifically request unscreened compost. And I think it's a great idea, because what we always say is you always have to put mulch on top of your compost to be able to help not only keep it in place, but that moisture retention, so those microbes survive and can proliferate those communities. So we can provide unscreened compost. It's actually more cost effective for us, so enables us to sell it at a more affordable price. The second thing I was going to mention is you mentioned manure and biosolid compost, but there's a third kind, which is the only kind Soilutions does now. We no longer intake or receive manure because of persistent herbicide risks, and also just the volatility around that source, but mostly persistent herbicide. So it'd be really interesting to see what the food waste would look like if you get more grant funding to test that compost.
So this was my, like, that whole rant about peer-reviewed publication. I have, like, most of my data is actually food waste compost, but I haven't gotten it published yet, so I didn't present it here. But yes, we have a ton related to food waste, and I will just briefly say that it's broadly the same. The microbial communities aren't changing dramatically, although Soil Food Web people will be glad to know that the fungi are much more interesting than the bacteria. The fungi are doing crazy things. And like I said, I'm very happy to share that out when I can get a couple of reviewers to
thank you
to rake me over the coals. But yes, food waste, yeah. And as I said before, like, whatever is on site, local, I know Casey and I have like battled in the car. I'm like, people should compost however they can, and he's like, people should do it well. And I think that we probably should land somewhere in the middle. But yeah,
well,
if people have food
you know,
waste, they should compost it. Yeah.
And we have a new grocery food waste program. So we're going to have really high volumes of food waste compost, like on par with how much biosolids are available in the market. And so it's better quality than anything that's ever been available. We believe we're very focused on that. And there's as much volume as people need. So we're really excited about manure-free, clean compost being available.
Nice. Yeah, and Reunity has, yeah, they've gotten around that the manure, the risk of herbicides, because they source all of their manure from like extremely trusted partners. Like they've just built up this relationship over, you know, decades where they're like, we know the people we're buying manure or receiving manure from, and we trust them that they purchase their hay from people who don't use herbicides. So it's kind of amazing. It's so relationship based, which gestures at the coalition, we know that's how things happen effectively is through these relationships. So yeah.
Great. Well, last question from the chat, perhaps. Christy is asking what kind of different results you get using mulch versus compost.
Yeah. Statistically, there was no difference, and no difference from the control, which is so surprising. So that's my scientific answer. My human answer is that, like, and actually Janet is on the call. Janet, I think you were the one who was like, hey, look, it just looks moister over here where the mulch is. That seems like that should affect germination in the spring, right? So like there was just sort of intuitive and being humans in the world support. And then going back to the healthy soil principles, right? Adding, covering the soil in any way is supporting the healthy soil principles. So I am certainly a fan of mulch. There's a bunch of work, and Quivira someday, if that funding comes through, are going to try branch mulch so that you don't even mulch it. You just lay the branches. And we think they've been doing that down in Big Bend National Park. And it changes livestock travel patterns, right? Because they will go around rather than straight down a gully. So it changes some of the erosion patterns. It shades the soil. It creates these places for germination. So they've shown really cool cool results so far without even having to mulch it. Like you just put it down, and that's even lower in inputs, right? So who did the test for our microbial community results? This was all metabarcoding, and I sent it off to university, whichever one's in Tucson. U of A, I don't want to get in trouble. Which one's in Tucson? U of A, okay. Do not say ASU if you mean U of A. They get so mad. U of A. Yeah, so this is metabarcoding with the ITS sequences.
Great. Well, fascinating. Thank you so much, Eva. We have to conclude.
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, no, this was great. We will have to have you back for more of the research that is not yet peer-reviewed. It's definitely worth following. I take away really that it's promising. It's really interesting that this sort of linear development between the amount of compost added and also that even wood chips or branches make a difference. That is maybe more achievable in terms of practical application. More acolytes in the chat. People are really thanking you, and so do I. So thanks everyone.
Could not have done it alone. I'm just the one talking. So many people, including in this room, have contributed immensely. So yeah, the standing on shoulders of giants is certainly true.
Thank you, Eva. This was awesome. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.